And good afternoon as we enter the afternoon and people start to roll into the room. So this week's Parsha is the Parshot Beha'alotcha. It opens with God telling Moshe to instruct Aaron regarding the lighting of the menorah in the tabernacle. And then Hashem tells Moshe about a special ritual which will allow the Levites to be the ones responsible for serving God and transporting the tabernacle. And Moses is also told that the Levites start their work in the tabernacle from the age of 25 and they retire at the age of 50. After that, you have a special commandment to offer a special Pesach offering, because of course there's a Korban Pesach, which is offered on the day before Passover, but some people were contaminated by contact with a human corpse before Passover, and therefore they weren't able to offer their sacrifice. And so they asked Moshe if there is any way that they can still offer the sacrifice. And the answer that Moshe receives from Hashem is that a person who is not able to offer the sacrifice at Passover time because of their contamination will have the opportunity to offer it a month later. Then there is something which we'll get back to later, that during the time that the Israelites are walking during the day, they follow a cloud. The cloud shows them the way. Hashem then commands Moshe to have 2 silver trumpets made. And these trumpets are to be used to signal to the assembly to gather in or to inform the camp that it's time to move on. And they're also to be used in war and also when offering certain types of sacrifices. Now, the Israelites travel through many locations, and Moses turns to his father-in-law, Jethro, and he urges him to stay with the people on their journey to the land of Canaan. But Jethro tells Moses that no, he's going to return to his family. Now, the Israelites now start complaining. They're complaining a lot. New complaints in this week's Parsha. What are they saying? They're saying we used to have cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Where do they have this fantastic menu? In Egypt, they claim. First, we've heard that they had such food in Egypt, and they complain, now we have nothing but manna. And Moses, as we'll get to later on when we're discussing this, takes this very, very hard. And he turns to Hashem and he complains to Hashem and says, God, why have you appointed me to be a leader of this people? And he tells Hashem that he would rather not be alive than have to lead this people further. Remarkable. And then Hashem replies to Moses as follows. He says, I'm going to appoint a Sanhedrin, a bunch of elders, 70 elders, who are going to help you to lead the people. And Hashem then tells Moses that the people will now be provided with meat. And indeed, that they will eat so much meat that they'll be sick of it. Moshe then replies to God and says, I can't understand, God, how will you be able to provide enough animals to feed meat to all of the Israelites? And Hashem reminds Moshe that he can do anything, and Moshe should wait to see what happens. Now, after this, there is a mysterious scene in which 2 men were prophesying in the camp. And so Joshua tells Moshe that these men should be punished because it's not respectful to Moses that these guys are prophesying. And Moshe says, no, Joshua, you should not be zealous for my sake. He says it would be a good thing if all the people of Israel were able to be prophets. After this, a wind comes and blows a great deal of quail into the camp. And the people go out to collect the quail. And many people pass away in that place as a punishment for their earlier complaints. As the Parsha comes to an end, Moshe's siblings, Miriam and Aaron, speak against Moshe. Now, the Torah is unclear as to what exactly they were complaining about. It seems to be connected to Moshe's wife, but it also involves the claim that Miriam and Aaron were somehow equal prophets to Moshe. And Hashem then tells all 3 siblings that this is not so. He says that when he communicates with other prophets, he does so in the form of a dream or a riddle. But when he appears to Moshe, he does in a clear vision. Moshe is the greater prophet. And as we come to the very end of the Parsha then, we see that Miriam is punished for her sin. She is afflicted with the Tzarat disease, and she has to leave the camp. And she's outside the camp for 7 days, and the Israelites wait for her to come back before moving on with their journey. So that is quite a long Parsha, the Parsha of Beha'alotcha. We welcome new people to the room now as we start to unpack some of these ideas. Now, one of the things in this long Parsha with lots happening, which I just mentioned, is that there is a lot of description of this cloud. We mentioned it briefly when we gave our summary, that the Jewish people follow the cloud during the day. And it seems to be a bit of a redundancy, in fact, in all the descriptions that are given in this Parsha of the cloud. There's lots of repetition, such that there's even an opinion that says that there were actually 7 different clouds based on all the different number of times this cloud is mentioned. But other commentaries explain that the idea here is not that there were 7 different clouds, rather there's an emphasis. And the emphasis is that there was no factor that would dissuade or prevent the people from journeying after the cloud. Now, what does that mean? Put yourself in the shoes of the Jewish people going through the wilderness. You might think it's quite simple. You just follow the cloud. It's probably not so simple. There might have been lots of reasons not to follow the cloud, to just stay put. You're staying on grazing land, you're exhausted, you've just erected your tent, and now you have to carry on moving. The people were moving through the wilderness. I want to stay where I am. They probably didn't like not knowing where they were going to put their head down on any given evening. And yet the Jewish people continued. They continued journeying. There was nothing that would stop them from faithfully following the path shown to them by Hashem on this journey, from following the cloud. And this idea of the Jewish people constantly moving, constantly on a journey, really goes back to the very origin of where we come from Abraham himself. Think of all of Abraham's traveling. He was not a person who had a very easy life just staying in one place. He traveled to Canaan, then he had to keep on traveling. There were 2 different famines. Think of Jacob, had to run away because his brother wanted to kill him. Later on, had to run away from his father-in-law, wanted to move away. There was a famine for him as well. He had to move out of the area and go and get some food. And it must be teaching us something about being a Jew. That being a Jew, both as a people and as each one of us individually, sometimes we have journeys in life. Sometimes we're not tranquil. We can't just sit still. We have to keep moving around, and it might make us feel a bit insecure. But we must know this has very deep roots, all the way back to Abraham and Yaakov, and also back to that generation in the wilderness, who may have found it very easy just to stay put, but realized that sometimes Hashem wanted them to keep going. A couple of times I've told stories about an individual in South Africa, a Jewish guy called Rabbi Sachs, who was one of the great opponents of the apartheid regime. And I actually went to see him. I had a meeting with him before I left South Africa. But Rabbi Sachs has a book called The Soft Vengeance of a Freedom Fighter, and talks about all his activism and talks about how he was the victim of a car bomb in 1988, I think in Mozambique, in which he lost his arm and his sight in his right eye. And in that book, he says that despite what he went through, in a certain way, he felt good about what happened. How could he feel good about being the victim of such a tragedy, of such an atrocity? Because he explains, ever since he was 17 years old, and he used to express his protest against the apartheid regime as a white man by sitting on a seat which said blacks only. Ever since that time, he said he'd been preparing himself for the bomb. Not for the bomb specifically, he didn't know he was going to necessarily be bombed, but for some great confrontation with apartheid power. And the question was always in his mind, whether consciously or unconsciously, would he pass the test? When he really met the strength of the opposition of those people who were determined to suppress Black people and anyone who was on their side, would he survive? Would he be brave? Would he hold fast to his beliefs? What would happen? How would he conduct himself? And now he explained he felt happy because he had the answer to that question, because he knew he'd got to that stage of the journey, that real difficulty, and yet nevertheless he'd managed to stay strong and stay true to his values. And so even amidst this situation of having lost sight in one eye and lost one arm, he still experienced an internal joy at fulfilling his deepest longings. It reminds me of what the great Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl taught, that any attempt that anyone had to restore inner strength whilst in the concentration camps had to be through having a vision for the future. When they would understand they were on a journey, as bleak as things seemed, but when they had a vision of what the future could be, that is what gave them strength. And so to be a member of the Jewish people is to have that strength to realize we're on a journey as we as a people are confronted by hatred, by those who want again to malign us, to harm us. And for ourselves as individuals, whatever we might be going through in life, we're on this journey, but we can still be strong and true to what we believe in and be inspired and strengthened by dreams of the future. So on the one hand, yes, those commentaries do emphasize in their commentary to our parasha the greatness of the Jewish people for staying on track. But the truth is, if we look at the plain sense of the stories that we encounter in this parasha, it isn't necessarily the Jewish people's finest hour. As I've mentioned, they complain about the menu. Why do we have to put up with manna? We had such fantastic, wonderful food when we were in Egypt. And they say, we remember the fish that we ate, bechinam, that we ate freely. The fish that was free for us. Some of the commentaries say, yeah, it was absolutely free. Some of them say it was a minimal price. But the rabbis of the Talmud and the Midrash say something which seems to be quite strange and distorting. They say what they meant was that at that time, not that the fish was free, that we didn't have to pay for it, but that we were free from mitzvot. We didn't have to worry about mitzvahs. How can that be what they're talking about? They're talking about having free fish, but what they really meant was that they were free from mitzvahs. But in reality, our sages are giving us a deep psychological insight over here. And I talked a little bit about this without referencing this particular section of the parasha in my video this week on the parasha. But the sages are understanding that very often when we complain, we're not complaining because of the thing that we've identified as wrong. We say, oh, there's a problem here, there's a problem there. The things we're actually complaining about aren't the real reason. And so the sages understand that the people, whether or not they had free fish in Egypt, was not the issue over here. What they were frustrated about was because they had to do these mitzvot. They didn't find joy and meaning in being Jewish, in doing the mitzvahs. And that manifested itself in the frustration and the irritation with the food that they had. How can we take a message from this for our own lives? I think the message is that when things are difficult for us, we can endure it if we identify with the goal. If we see, whether it's mitzvot or any trials that we have in life, as just being a pain, just being an irritant, just being draining, then it can be very, very hard. But if we can understand the goal of what we're working towards in life, like those people, our ancestors did not when it came to Judaism, then it can get very difficult and we can become bitter. When people aren't connected to deeper meaning, then they can start to criticize at the slightest pretext. But when we have a sense of meaning in our lives, it can give us that joy and that strength to follow the cloud and not to complain about the fish. I'd like to share now a third insight as we looked like there was someone else who was waiting, but they've gone. A third insight, which I'd like to share now, which relates to the same idea, but now looks not into the world of the Jewish people, but into the world of Moses himself. Because as I mentioned when I summarized the parasha, this is a very difficult parasha for Moses. He turns to God and says, God, I'd rather be dead than leading this people. And we might ask, having read all these stories of the Torah before, but also the ones that come earlier in the Torah, Why is Moses complaining so much? After all, is this the first time in the Torah that the Jewish people were difficult? Is it the first time that they complained? Surely not. Moses has had this before. And every time Hashem has saved the day. And so why Moses' agitation here? And the answer seems to be that Moses is so upset because what you're telling me is showing me that the people haven't changed after all this. After all this that we've gone through, they're the same. They've gone through the splitting of the sea. They've gone through the revelation of Mount Sinai. They've built the tabernacle. There have been some good moments. And now, still, they're complaining. Still, they're rebelling. And Moses, at this stage, sees defeat staring him in the face. He has tried to be a leader. He has tried to help them, to guide them. At times, it seemed like it was going well. After all this is where they are. And it's humbling, and maybe even in a certain way, as painful as this is, comforting for us to know that even the great Moses clearly reached this stage in his life where he thought he'd failed, even though, as we know, he was so great, he was such a great leader. And then we watch what Hashem's solution is for Moses. Hashem says, I'm going to find 70 deputies now who are going to help you. The question we must have is, how are these guys really going to be able to, how are these elders going to be able to help Moses? When all's said and done, the people are complaining. What can these 70 people do? But when we look carefully at the text and see what Hashem does and what the Torah tells us, it says that Hashem put the spirit of Moshe on these 70 elders. He put the spirit of Moshe on these 70 elders. What does that mean? He let Moshe see the difference that he could make to that one group. The way in that one group of 70 elders became more holy as a result of Moshe. That his spirit was put upon them. At that very stage in which Moshe was exasperated and felt there was no hope and felt that he had failed, Hashem showed him that he could succeed. He let Moshe see the influence he had on others. And this message can come for us in helping other people who are struggling. We've talked a lot today about how we ourselves can carry on, can develop a tenacity. How can we help other people when they're struggling? How can we emulate what Hashem does for Moshe? Sometimes during a Shiva, people come and they relate the kindnesses that the person who died did for them. How sad it is that the deceased are not there to hear their words. How tragic it is that we so often keep our gratitude to ourselves, speaking it aloud only when the person to whom we feel indebted is no longer here. What the Torah is telling us we must do is to follow Hashem's example and let people know how special they are to us. Let people know the impact they had on us. Don't wait until they're not here anymore. There are people who never think of leaving a taxi or a restaurant without thanking the driver or the waitress, but they're much stingier with grateful words to those who do the most to enhance their lives, their spouses, their family members, their friends. When people feel down, let them know that what a difference they have made to you. And in doing so, you can raise their spirits. And so we've encountered within the very same parsha a collection of ideas which move in the same direction. The importance of understanding that to be a Jew is to be on a journey even when it's hard. The knowledge that when we stay true to what we believe in and we dream of the future, it will give us strength. And the understanding that to give other people strength, we must let them know how much we appreciate them and what a blessing they have brought to us. With that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. I can see someone else just coming over here, so I apologize that you only just made it. But we wish Shabbat Shalom to Tzvi. Welcome back to the Pre-Shabbat Inspiration. Great to see you. Lillian, welcome back. I'm glad you got the email. Steve, great that you made it this week. Special welcome to Nettie. Great to see you on Zoom. I don't know when I last saw you on Zoom. And welcome to Diana. And great to see Carol back at the Pre-Shabbat Inspiration. Also, hello to everyone who will be watching this on the record next week. Wish you all Shabbat Shalom.